We're going to go into detail regarding those office and industrial submarkets, but first of all, Andrew, a question for you. What are the sort of 5 takeaways from this year's report?
Absolutely. Well, this year's report is probably one of the most important ones we've done after the past 12 months that we've all been through. We've prepared this report using unbiased data. It's not just ours, it is the county's data. So we can see really the key trends of what's gone on over the past 12 months. And one thing that's really clear to come out of it is actually the commercial property market's recovery is well underway. We're seeing this in our day-to-day roles, but also you can see this within the data. 12 months ago, April 2020 was obviously a pretty tough time for the commercial market, which followed that national sentiment of what is going on and that shock and panic. We're starting to see inquiries coming forward, filling some of that void space that came back, and office take-up, for example. It's a sub-market that's really been affected by this pandemic as people's working habits pretty much changed overnight, has started to recover in a way in which good quality space is being taken up. People are starting to look to the future of, right, what does my business model look like and where do my staff come to? I think we're not out of the woods yet with regards to the office market. We're seeing a lot of availability coming onto the market as a lot of spaces are now being brought forward as people saying, right, we're not going to return, or I don't need this full amount of space, or I don't need this full building. So there's certainly not out of the woods there yet, but the inquiries are there for that space to be taken up with. Our industrial market has remained pretty resilient alongside probably what was being found within the country, as distributors and manufacturers, not all, but some have had a pretty good time over the past 12 months, and that space is really being utilised. As a county, we're well positioned within the country, being in the middle. We've got the 2 motorways running through it, and with all our motorway junctions as well. So we're really well positioned to take that industrial market forward. Deal sizes, we're seeing sort of the average deal sizes of both industrial and offices staying the same. So we're not seeing necessarily people downsizing. That rush to downsizing doesn't mean it's not coming, but at the moment people are sort of saying, look, we want to stay in the sort of size space that they've taken previously. I think that's because as a county we don't really do large floor plates too well, but actually that's turning out to be a positive now. You look at the large floor plates of the city, such as Birmingham down the southeast and in London, we're seeing within the news at the moment that people aren't wanting to return to those just quite yet. The spaces such as the one we're in today and the ones we find throughout the county really are appealing to everyone. I think one thing we have struggled as a county, not just in the last 12 months, but for certainly as long as our data's gone back, is the availability of freehold space. It's still hard to find, and actually within the past 12 months, as the interest rate has remained low, and as perhaps putting your capital into the stocks and shares, and those markets has remained a bit more uncertain, more volatile. Property is becoming quite a safe bet, but those opportunities are just so scarce at the moment. We're still seeing, even in the last 12 months, capital values achieving record figures across the county, and that's somewhere that we really need to address, is that availability of freehold space, as well as the leasehold space that's coming forward.
So a question really for you, Gary. This is the second year that we've been issuing our sort of formal report. How do you use the report, and do you find it useful from a Worcestershire LEP point of view?
Yeah, so even those takeaways at the high level, the strategy and the going forward is really helpful, because that sort of defines the projects or defines the discussion of the LEP and its local authority partners and the investments that we make. But the detail as well is really helpful to understand that difference between Redditch and Bromsgrove to Worcester and Malvern. You start to kind of plan that through, and that means the investments that we then bid for government cash for come through. Vale Park has been part of the Getting Building Fund. Those industrial units are up, they're already let. Malvern, in terms of the expansion of the science park, fantastic investment, not quite on stream yet, but we're already seeing demand for that as well. And again, if you looked at the Malvern figures, you might sort of think, oh, actually, there's no office demand there. But that's because the market's been quite limited and very difficult, and there isn't that huge amount of availability. But suddenly, when you put some availability there seems to be some good news. Our other investments, then looking at sort of Redditch and the Gateway, really, that with Amazon coming in and really following that industrial distribution market, which, as we know, is really buoyant. So understanding that from a kind of strategic point of view, then we can put those discussions into the LEP board in with our partners, and that starts to bring a sort of project pipeline together about where we're really keen for the private sector to always invest, but where are those bits that the public sector can make a difference, and just kind of signal to the market to really then open up other opportunities. So the report's absolutely a valuable tool for us in that whole shaping, making and forming, and where we're going next and how.
I think that's a really good point Gary mentions there about looking at the individual sub-markets. As a county, we've got a lot to celebrate in that we don't necessarily just do one thing really well, we do a multitude of things well. So we do those smaller offices perhaps in Bromsgrove, those high quality tech offices in Malvern, those city centre offices in Worcester, but likewise in the industrial market, you do your small 2 to 10,000 square foot units quite well up in perhaps the north of the county around Bromsgrove, but then we see Worcester 6 and we see down to Wychavon with Vale Park and Hartlebury up near the Wyre Forest as well. So actually it's a great document for shouting about what each sub-market does well, that if there is some investment, is some development coming into the county, you can direct that person to say, well actually we know that this sub-market does this sector very well and this is where you want to be focusing on.
I agree with you, Andrew. I think it's something I've seen over the last 10 years that we can actually cater for every business, really. We've got such a wide range, haven't we, of different opportunities, which is, we talked about the game changer sites, which is the larger stuff, but the smaller office suites, the little business units. And one of the things that I feel is just so important after the 12 months that we've just been is the startup businesses, really keen to attract those into the county and make sure they're supported.
Yeah, and that then builds you kind of economic resilience. So heaven help us what comes next. But, if it's recovery, it's probably going to be a bit bumpy. It just means that Worcester's the kind of place that you perhaps wouldn't think of initially, but suddenly when you realise what's here, the connectivity that we've got, that Birmingham-Bristol corridor, the access into airports, HS2. So just looking outside the region, suddenly realise actually this is a great location, and we do see quite a variety of sectors. So we haven't really got one specialist area, but then that builds a very different skills and population base. We've still got a very good manufacturing history here, and therefore those kind of skilled people are in that labour force, and they're sort of there and willing. So it really opens up that opportunity to think, actually, perhaps coming out of the southeast, you might not know the county, but actually there's a lot here and a great thriving business community that works together.
I think the thing that I've been impressed about being involved with the Worcestershire WLEP on the board of directors is really the vision, the 20-year vision, and it's great that we can actually come through the last 12 months and really look and say, okay, what's this county going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years, which I suspect not every region is doing really, but that's a theme I know that you're keen to continue.
Yeah, very much so. You can start to predict some of those longer term trends, being able to communicate to some of the businesses who probably have been business planning on a 1 week, 3 week, 3 months, but actually now being able to get your head out, you can kind of see where some of those opportunities are, and that's probably where the Big Den Technology Accelerator, starts to capture some of those exciting new ideas, some of the alumni that we're starting to see out of that, whether it's Plinks, who are working with HS2, they're at now 20 people, and they're starting to come to you saying, right, okay, we can't be in this sort of incubator space anymore. We now need to be in a proper office, with our sort of staff that's growing at a rate, and those are the companies that we really got in the county that are really exciting.
And Andrew, you've seen that, haven't you? I think businesses find themselves actually in good shape. Probably not the case 12 months ago, but now feeling they're a lot better off than they perhaps anticipated and actually looking to expand. Would that be fair?
That's just been the most bizarre thing about the past 12 months, hasn't it? We've seen peaks and troughs within our market before, but usually they're peaks for everyone and troughs for everyone. Look at 2008. This year, some sectors have just done very well and some not so well. I think the data to come out of this is actually some of those sectors we thought, well, they will have been hit quite hard, haven't been. We'll go on later on to talk about the Worcester office market, for example, where we're sat at the moment. You'd have thought, well, actually businesses wanted to come into the city centre, come into the high street, there'd be no market for that, but there really is. The space we're sat in now is a great example of that, in that it came on right at the start of this pandemic and it's leaving the pandemic almost fully let. So that's sort of been the really good thing to see is we've identified all the sectors and all of them have signs of growth and signs that they're doing really, really well, and there's some promising stuff to come, I believe.
So just tell me, for the benefit of the people listening, why is it that the GJS Dillon report focuses on the office and industrial market? Why do you feel it's not really appropriate within this report to go into that sort of more difficult retail market?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, us as a practice, we are office and industrial specialists. So a lot of it's led by that, but also the actual accessibility to data. This report doesn't use our data, it uses everyone's transactions, and we've got systems that record those office and industrial deals very, very well, so that's all pulled in from. The retail market's a little harder to record because a lot of it's done on the larger scale, out of larger cities, so a lot of retail agents, for example, are based within London or Birmingham, so it's quite hard to record that data, but also you've got the smaller deals as well, your sort of more localised high street deals, which perhaps don't get recorded or are more short term. It's a little bit more difficult to get the data pinned down.
But I know that's a theme really that is important to the LEP in terms of getting those high street, those town centres. We've discussed it at length, have we not, in terms of how to get people back into those locations. So I know you're working with various different local authorities throughout the county.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I even take it into our small team. We've got some people who are really keen to get back into the office, some people who are really quite nervous. And I think the same applies to the high street is, how are we going to open the high street back up, where you've got some people who are really keen to get back in, want to touch the goods that they buy. You've got some people who kind of think, well, actually, COVID has meant that I'm kind of, and I think it is, how do we open that sort of retail? Because that is the measure, as we know, at the moment we can't holiday abroad, so staycation is a thing. We know already that Cornwall and those hotspots are fully booked, so someone like Worcestershire as a tourism venue and a retail venue, and that side of the economy probably produces about between sort of 10 and 12% of our sort of GVA. So it's absolutely critical. And somebody looking always looks at what does the retail bit look like for a measure of the kind of local economy. They don't go looking at the office and the industrial. They always go into the high street and say, well, the high street's thriving, this must be a great place to invest and locate. And therefore, the high street's been pretty robust. Obviously, those national chains that have gone. But we've seen it, we're seeing sort of it come back. I've been really pleased as I walk through just to see the number of people. And I think how we then do the next 6 months, I think, is really key to kind of give people the confidence to come back and spend their money.
Yes, and I think people want to get out, don't they, really? We've all been cooped up over the last 12 months, so it's getting people back out. And yes, you're right. I felt really, from a retail point of view, it was due a change. Well, we saw that anyway, didn't we, with the rise of online shopping. Yeah. And now it's a natural change, which has probably been accelerated by the last 12 months. So,
definitely, that acceleration's happened. And I think, we were sort of thinking in our sort of 20-year thing, this would be sort of 2025. So that's the sort of, again, the help of the data. Although we don't cover retail in the report, those kind of forecasts and trends are some of the things that we're working hard to pick up.
But you're right, it's so important. Those office occupiers are, wanting to be in city centres, and that means they need restaurants, coffee shops, and places to spend their money. So the two are very much hand in hand. So it's interesting. We've got to get that dynamic right in the county.
Yeah, and opening in a safe, secure way.
Sure.
I think another market we don't touch within this report is the residential market. It is obviously as a commercial report. We've got a sister business, the House Surveyors, which is showing us that market's very buoyant, which has come from obviously the stamp duty reforms that have gone on within the past 12 months. I think one area that this report perhaps does touch on a bit is making sure that commercial space has its position within that residential world. We're looking at talk a lot about developments, bringing developments forward, and just making sure that actually the allocation between residential schemes and commercial schemes is fair, and giving these developers confidence to bring commercial space forward as well as residential, because there's a market for it and there's really good demand for it. Again, referring back to where we're sat, we're surrounded by flats where we are and houses, but this space is done well because people see it as right, it's a community and you're part of something wider. So we don't touch on that market, that residential market within this report, but we do sort of look at, right, how does the commercial world sit alongside it, and making sure that those developments that are coming forward have an element of commercial to them to really celebrate the occupiers that are coming forward.
I think you've raised some interesting points there, and certainly I know that our residential survey team is sort of very busy at the moment with house transactions, and it looks like a lot of people moving up from the southeast. So we've got a different dynamic in the county, haven't we? We've got a lot of people that, you know, just don't know Worcestershire as a county, but it's quite interesting. They're coming to live here and probably you know, will need places to work, really. So quite interesting that we can deal with that new audience, really.
And that's really the sort of, you know, the transport investment, the parkway, the London in 2 hours, but also what that opens up is suddenly you can commute to Oxford. You know, the Bristol and the M5 corridor is fundamental, but also it's not car. It's, you know, we're moving that into a more sort of train environment, which, given again the net zero agenda, is going to really take off. You know, we just tested a hydrogen train in the county. Those are the things that start to really make a difference and make, you know, actually that flexibility and adaptability, I think, is the sort of residential trend, but it's the trend into the commercial as well. People are looking for space that they can flex, move, change. You know, so people might not be in the office 5 days a week, but they need more space to kind of bring the team together. And I think that this is a location, being in the centre of the country, that's fantastic to do that.
Yeah, we often talk about sort of physical communications, don't we, of which we're quite blessed in the county, but also it's that sort of IT communication as well. So lots happened in terms of broadband in the county, and that's an ongoing issue. But we see City Fibre investing in Worcester, so fibre as the premise will be available. And again, in Kidderminster, they're looking to invest. In the rural areas, we're seeing Airband come in, and we're working with government in terms of gigabit vouchers and those kind of things. So our connectivity, and which we've done drive trials and all those kind of things to make sure that, you know, there are pockets, but also, you know, that connectivity is improving year on year with great investment, and we work with that digital sector to bring that investment, because it's a big enabler and we know we've got to make it happen. Obviously, we did the 5G test bed as well with Bosch and Mazak and Kinetic, you know, and that's been a really proving that we can do business in a different way. And I think that probably one of the things out of the pandemic that we've learned is actually business has changed. You know, suddenly, why do I need to be in London 2-3 times a month? I don't. And therefore, relying on that digital connectivity, it's nearly a fourth utility. Agreed, and I think that's something I've been reading in the national property press, which perhaps, Andrew, you can comment on, which is hearing about the sort of office hub and the sort of, you know, why do we need to go into city centres anymore? You know, strategically based office hubs around the country really would be probably what you know, big companies now thinking. Worcestershire brilliantly placed. We were on those motorway networks. Do you feel that we should be setting out our stall for that particular slice of the office market?
Yeah, absolutely. We're brilliantly placed, as you mentioned, being on those motorway networks. We've got the workforce. We've got a fantastic workforce here, and that's growing as people are moving into the county. But also, people's priority of being around other occupiers, although we do have great business and centres here, we've also got that rural side of things. And we're seeing a lot of inquiries where people don't necessarily want to be in city centres to be around businesses, because they can connect to people via Zoom, Skype, Teams, etc. So it's working on that physical side, our actual location, also on that tech side as well, and making sure that we can create somewhere for everyone.
Thank you, gents. Really great report from you, Andrew, and thank you to you, Gary, for your support from the Worcestershire WLEP. It's been great to have you on board this year, and something that we'll continue to do as a practice year on, and be interesting to look back at this year, hopefully with a sort of positive spin on things, to say a great opportunity going forward.
Yeah, definitely. It's a fantastic report that we'll continue to use.